Lil Xan deserves his failure. 3.5 years ago, Lil Xan was kicking back and boasting about having 3 different Los Angeles apartments on the same podcast. Even if he had once appeared to be invincible, it was clear that, in the long run, Lil Xan's failure was not only inevitable but also merited. And it all started with what appeared to be a bad work ethic that appeared to have existed since high school. Now, we shouldn't claim that having a weak work ethic invariably follows from having terrible marks in school. There are simply too many instances of average students failing horribly in school before moving on to achieve greatness in a different sector in the long run. But there's a difference between failing every class before dropping out of high school your freshman year, as was the situation with Lil Xan, and finishing school with poor grades, creating what you would describe as a predisposed, innately bad work ethic. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell symbol for more wonderful videos. Throughout this video, there will be multiple instances of Lil Xan failing to perform the essential tasks when they were called for. We've already talked about his quitting school in his first year, but it persisted throughout the beginning of his music career when he repeatedly skipped meetings with well-known rappers who had given him opportunities. Lil Man was discovered when he had fewer than 2,000 followers by a person by the name of DJ Fu, who wanted to take him to meet a prospective manager by the name of Stat Quo, an old-school sober rapper and management who had previously worked with Eminem. However, as was already indicated, Lil Xan kept missing the meetings due to his disorganization or the belief that they were too good to be true despite this absurdly large potential, while still at such a little follow the account. Rappers on SoundCloud were getting so prevalent at the time that they were starting to become a meme. Gucci Gang's Small Pump with Lil Peep and Lil Skies. People had to click to choose whether or not a song called Lyrical Lemonade Toddler Betrayed by an artist the stupidly named Lil Xanax was a meme when it was released. The fact that the song was actually rather good led to a perfect storm that greatly increased its appeal. Soon after, it would surpass every other video on Cole Bennett's Lyrical Lemonade in terms of views. However, there were a lot of remarks saying that if he kept making songs like this, he wouldn't be a joke. That after this project, he will be considered as somewhat of a one-hit wonder, as 6 months later, he'd release his long-anticipated first studio album, which will be met with many negative reviews from individuals like Anthony Fantano. The reasoning for the poor release would be discussed by Adam22 at a later date, and it was what you might call unsurprising. Another problem could have been that Lil Xan might have been seduced into a false sense of security about his future and abilities as an artist as a result of the phenomenal success of his single Betrayed, leading him to believe that he could now relax a little and take his foot off the accelerator. This is the self-described reason why T-Pain's rap career ultimately collapsed. It could have been the same narrative with Lil Xan. The outcome was one fantastic banger to lead the album, followed by 15 other terrible songs. But this only highlighted Lil Xan's lack of personal accountability as a fault. We don't yet know who is to blame for the first album's failure, but in truth, it's usually a combination of both parties and is truly one person's fault or another. Lil Xan is the artist, though therefore, if you publicly release anything under your name and it fails, you must regrettably take responsibility for it. Additionally, even if it wasn't your fault, most of the time people respect you a lot more when you just admit it was your fault, since it shows humility and a want to do better. Anyway, despite the fact that his debut album was somewhat of a failure, Lil Xan managed to maintain his popularity after the initial uproar, because when you get past the minor victim complex and actually watch him on one of these podcasts, he comes across as a surprisingly likable guy. He isn't an egotistical jerk like, say, Lil Pump, and generally speaking, he is open and honest about the good and bad in his life. He is interesting to see and listen to because of his ridiculous claims about having several threesomes in the same week, which has helped him become somewhat of a celebrity as a postal rapper. However, on the other hand, the volume of his stories, many of which are loosely based on regrettable choices, exposes his lifestyle as one that revolves around a never-ending loop of momentary pleasure. And this is the issue with so many of these SoundCloud rappers. By default, the branding glorifies drug use by inviting hoes to the crib every night and using loans to get gutsy automobiles. They become so well known and prosperous while leading this lifestyle Louis Vuitton expensive jewelry that they erroneously believe they are on the right track. The other issue with living this kind of lifestyle is that it's typically followed by a variety of bad financial decisions in the beginning, even if real long-term sustainable success is actually at least in part decided by your capacity to avoid these temptations. However, only 6 months later in another video uploaded to YouTube by No Jumper, this appeared to have changed as Lil Xan's reckless spending and disregard for priceless items were on full display. He would begin by mentioning that he would accept any sponsorships because he was short on money at the time. You could probably argue that Lil Xan was just being extravagant when the camera was on him, but there was plenty of evidence to suggest that he was also quite wasteful with his money when it wasn't being recorded. For instance, in a previous episode of the No Jumper podcast, he discussed how he would take 7 of his friends to Universal Studios and pay for everyone's admission just to buy one drink before leaving. In addition, Lil Xan would borrow money to buy a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, which has a starting price of about $130,000 US. Let's put aside the subsequent incident, when Lil Xan would get enraged and start his own automobile. Taking out a loan to buy a car and then taking out a loan to buy a premium car only to flaunt it on social media doubles the level of folly for this decision. Borrowing money to buy a premium car merely to brag about it on social media while working in a creative field where you could lose your job at any time triples the amount. On the 21st of December 2017, just before he'd buy the car, Lil Xan would make a tweet that read, "If you live in the Inland Empire La area and want to meet me tonight, pull up to 100 to 110 North 5th Street, Redland, Ca 92,373 United States at 7:30. This furthered the stupidity of his G-Wagon purchase, however, and led to an additional $100,000 fine. It's difficult to call Xan an idiot for this one because it was still early in his career and the tweet was posted only 4 hours before the meeting time. He likely anticipated only a few people to show up for photos and autographs considering the location was also on the very outskirts of LA. However, as you might imagine, this isn't what happened because around 2,000 people showed up, causing cars and streets to be damaged and ultimately requiring the police to send in the helicopter unit before Lil arrived. Mac Miller, another rapper who owned one of these vehicles, served as Tiny Xan's initial source of most inspiration. Sadly though, Mac would pass away just 9 months later. Lil Xan would also go into great detail in this same interview about his intention to give up music and just become a public figure. The tracks he releases won't have the necessary level of effort to compete with other artists who are giving it their all, and Lil Xan's attempt to quit music and instead become a celebrity public figure didn't really work either after an explosive year on Instagram in 2018. His growth would slow dramatically and has been in continuous decline for the last 25 months, leading to an Instagram live strangle. Mac Miller, another rapper who owned one of these vehicles, served as Tiny Xan's initial source of inspiration. Sadly though, Mac would pass away just 9 months later. The Lil Xan would also go into great detail in this same interview about his intention to give up music and just become a public figure. Lil Xan would retort when many accused him of snitching on his manager, even though it was he who had a drug problem, by saying that you can't snitch if you're not in a gang. Lil Man would also say during the Instagram live stream that his management had taken the G-Wagon away from him since Lil Xan still owed $30,000 on it, which Lil Xan would argue was unjust since he had already been paid for the majority of it. Without $30,000 to purchase his G-Wagon outright, a dwindling follower count across all of his social media channels, and no new music in more than 7 months, it appears that Lil Xan's career may be coming to an end. That's it for today, guys. What did you think of the video? Please share with us in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell icon for more incredible videos.